The notification pierced through my bedroom darkness at 2 in the morning, dragging me from restless sleep. My phone screen glowed with a message from my parents that would change everything. Caitlin, we need to inform you that Madison has expressed discomfort with your presence at Thanksgiving dinner. We know you spent $650,000 to save our house, but we must respect her wishes. Please make other arrangements. My fingers trembled as I stared at those cold, businesslike words. No gratitude, no acknowledgement of the sacrifice I'd made just 72 hours ago. I typed back a single word that would mark the end of who I used to be. Noted. The memory of that desperate phone call was still fresh when I received their dismissive text. My mother's voice had cracked with panic as she explained how they were 48 hours away from losing the house I'd grown up in. Caitlin, sweetheart, we've nowhere else to turn. The medical bills from your father's surgery combined with some investments that went bad, we need $650,000 or we'll be on the street. Without hesitation, I'd liquidated my entire retirement portfolio, cashed out my investment accounts, and even borrowed against my life insurance policy. At 11 o'clock that night, I'd sat in my financial advisor's office, signing paper after paper, while he tried to talk me out of it. This will set your retirement back by 20 years, he'd warned, but how could I let my parents become homeless? The wire transfer confirmation came through at midnight. I'd saved them, or so I thought. It wasn't until I was organizing the mountain of financial documents the next day that I noticed something odd. Mixed in with the papers my parents had sent were receipts that didn't match their story. Designer furniture purchases, luxury car lease payments, resort vacation bookings, all dated within the last 2 years, all with Madison's name attached. My stomach churned as I dug deeper. Credit card statements showed a clear pattern: $40,000 for Madison's first boutique that closed after 3 months, $60,000 for her organic juice bar that never opened, $90,000 for her life coaching certification and world travel to find herself, another $70,000 for her failed podcast studio. The numbers kept climbing, each failed venture funded by our parents while they claimed poverty to me. The receipts painted a picture I'd been too blind to see. While I'd been working 70-hour weeks building my career as a financial consultant, scrimping and saving every penny my younger sister had been living like royalty on our parents' dime. They'd been secretly funneling money to her while I paid for groceries during my visits, covered their utility bills when they were short, and never asked for a penny of the college loans I'd taken out myself. I sat surrounded by evidence of their deception, realizing that the medical bills and bad investments were fabrications. The real reason they'd nearly lost the house was that they'd been bankrolling Madison's fantasy lifestyle. They hadn't even tried to hide it well. They simply knew I'd never look. Good, reliable Caitlin would just write the check and save the day. The trust I'd built over 32 years crumbled as I processed receipt after receipt. They'd chosen Madison's comfort over their own roof, then manipulated me into bailing them out. And now, barely 3 days later, they were choosing her again. The morning after receiving that 2 a.m. dismissal, I noticed an unusual silence from my phone. The family group chat, typically buzzing with daily updates and photos, showed no new messages. When I tried to send a good morning greeting, an error message appeared. You are no longer a participant in this chat. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on my kitchen floor. They'd removed me from the family group chat. After everything I'd done, I wasn't even worthy of being included in casual family conversations. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my cousin Bradley, speaking in hushed tones like he was sharing state secrets. Caitlin, I'm sending you something. Just prepare yourself. Okay, I'm sorry you have to see this. The screenshots arrived in rapid succession. My extended family's group chat had exploded with messages about me, and Madison was leading the charge. I had to put my foot down. Her first message read, Caitlin has been holding that money over Mom and Dad's heads, making them feel like beggars in their own home. She made Mom cry for hours yesterday, going on and on about how they owe her now. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I hadn't spoken to my mother since sending the wire transfer confirmation. The lies continued, each more elaborate than the last. Madison claimed I'd threatened to take the house back if they didn't follow my rules. She said I'd demanded receipts for every purchase they made. According to her fiction, I'd even insisted on having my name added to the deed. The responses from family members I'd helped over the years cut deeper than Madison's lies. Aunt Dorothy, whose chemotherapy treatments I'd paid for when her insurance wouldn't cover experimental drugs, wrote, "I always knew Caitlin had a controlling side. Money changes people." Uncle Robert, whose son I'd helped through college, added, "This is what happens when you lord your success over family. Madison, you're right to protect your parents from that toxicity." My grandmother's sister, Great-Aunt Patricia, whom I'd moved into a better care facility last year, chimed in. "Young people today think money makes them superior. In my day, we helped family without making them grovel." The betrayal multiplied with each message. These weren't strangers. These were people I'd sacrificed for, celebrated with, loved unconditionally. They swallowed Madison's poison without questioning a word. Bradley's voice message came through next. "There's more, Caitlin. I'm so sorry. Madison told everyone you only gave $50,000, not the full amount. She's saying you're exaggerating to make yourself look better." I scrolled through more screenshots. Madison had crafted an elaborate narrative where she was the protective daughter, shielding our parents from their ungrateful eldest child. She'd even posted old photos of herself with our parents, captioned with quotes about true family bonds that money can't buy. The final screenshot showed a message I'll never forget. Madison had written, "I've decided Thanksgiving should be about gratitude and peace." Caitlin's negative energy would ruin that for everyone. Sometimes loving someone means protecting others from their worst impulses. 53 family members had liked her message. 53 people who'd eaten at my table, borrowed money they'd never repaid, called me when they needed help, had decided I was the villain in this story. I spent the rest of that morning on my bathroom floor processing the calculated cruelty of it all. Madison hadn't just convinced our parents to uninvite me, she'd poisoned my entire extended family against me. While I'd been quietly helping everyone, she'd been building her narrative of the selfish, controlling sister. And when the time came to strike, she'd executed her plan perfectly. 3 days later, I was leading a crucial client presentation when our conference room door burst open. Madison stood there dressed in a designer suit I had no doubt our parents had purchased her face, twisted in theatrical concern. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she announced to the room full of executives from our biggest potential client. "But this is a family emergency. Caitlin, we need to talk about what you're doing to our parents." My boss, Richard Steinberg, looked between us with raised eyebrows. The 5 executives from Morrison Industries shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I'd been working on their account for 6 months, and we were minutes away from signing a $12 million contract. "Madison, this is neither the time nor place," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Please wait in the lobby and we can speak after my meeting." She stepped further into the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. "This can't wait. Our mother is having chest pains from the stress you've caused. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof, and you sit here in your fancy office playing executive while destroying our family." "Security," I managed to say, reaching for the conference phone. But Madison was on a roll, her voice rising with practiced emotion. "You gave them that money just so you could control them. You think you can buy their love, buy their obedience. They're not your employees, Caitlin. They're human beings." Mr. Morrison, the CEO, whose business we were courting, stood up. "Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting." "No, please," I started, but Madison cut me off. $650,000, she shrieked. She claims she gave them $650,000. Can you believe that lie? My sister has always had delusions of grandeur, but this is a new low. 50,000 maybe, but she's multiplying it by 13 to make herself look like some kind of savior. 2 security guards finally arrived, moving toward Madison. She backed away, but not before delivering her final performance. "I'm leaving, but everyone here should know the truth about Caitlin. She destroys everything she touches. Ask her why her fiancé left. Ask her why she has no real friends. Ask her why her own family can't stand to be around her. The guards escorted her out as she continued shouting accusations down the hallway. The conference room fell into excruciating silence. I stood there, my carefully prepared presentation forgotten, watching my professional reputation crumble in real time. "I apologize for the disruption," I said quietly. "Shall we continue with the presentation?" Mr. Morrison's expression was sympathetic but firm. "I think we need some time to reconsider this partnership. We'll be in touch." They filed out one by one, avoiding eye contact. 6 months of work gone. Richard remained seated, his fingers steepled under his chin. We sat in silence for a full minute before he spoke. "Caitlin, you're one of my best consultants, but I can't have family drama playing out in our offices. Take the rest of the week off. We'll discuss your future here when you return." I nodded, gathering my materials with shaking hands. As I walked to my office, I could feel eyes on me from every cubicle. The whispers had already started. By the time I reached my desk, my phone was buzzing with notifications. Madison had been live streaming the entire confrontation on Instagram. The video showed me from the worst possible angles, looking cold and corporate, while she appeared passionate and concerned. The comments were already pouring in. "Rich sister can't handle the truth." "Money really does corrupt people." "Team Madison all the way." She tagged our company, ensuring maximum visibility. Within an hour, the video had thousands of views and hundreds of shares. My professional reputation, built over a decade of 80-hour weeks and sacrificed weekends, was being destroyed in real time. I sat in my office watching the view count climb, realizing Madison's ambush had been meticulously planned. The timing during my biggest deal, the live streaming, the theatrical performance. Nothing was spontaneous. She'd researched when my important meeting was scheduled. She'd practiced her lines. She'd even worn an outfit that would look good on camera. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving anymore. Madison was systematically dismantling every aspect of my life, and she was doing it with surgical precision. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by bankers' boxes, searching for any legal documentation that might help me recover the money I'd given my parents. If I was going to lose my job and my family, I at least needed to protect what was left of my financial future. As I sorted through years of tax returns and investment statements, a single document caught my eye. It was a letter from a law firm dated 7 years ago, addressed to me but sent to my parents' house. I'd never seen it before. The letter referenced Eleanor Whitman's irrevocable trust and my status as sole beneficiary upon reaching the age of 25. My hands stilled. Grandmother Eleanor had died when I was 15. I remembered the funeral, the grief, the way she'd whispered, "Take care of yourself first," as her final words to me, but a trust fund. This was the first I'd heard of it. I immediately called Thomas Chen, a private investigator recommended by my colleague. Despite the late hour, he agreed to meet me the next morning. By noon the following day, he'd uncovered a paper trail that left me speechless. The Eleanor Whitman Trust had been established with $2.8 million. My grandmother, who'd built a successful chain of bakeries from nothing, had left everything to me, her eldest grandchild. The trust documents were explicit. My parents would serve as trustees only until I turned 25, at which point all assets would transfer to me automatically. I was now 32. For 7 years, my parents had been illegally controlling money that belonged to me. Thomas spread financial statements across his desk. "They've been quite clever about it," he said, pointing to various transactions. "They never touched the principal, which would have triggered automatic notifications, but the interest and investment returns. Those they've been siphoning off systematically." The numbers made me dizzy. The trust had been earning between 8 and 12% annually. We were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that should have been mine, instead funding Madison's ventures and my parents' lifestyle. "There's more." Thomas continued pulling out another set of documents. These withdrawals match exactly with the failed businesses you told me about. Every time Madison started a new project, there was a corresponding withdrawal from the trust's earnings. Your parents weren't funding her with their money. They were funding her with yours. I studied the dates. Madison's boutique, $40,000 withdrawn from my trust. The juice bar, $60,000 from my trust. The world travel and life coaching certification, $90,000 from my trust. Every single time I thought my parents were spoiling Madison, they'd actually been stealing from me to do it. Can we prove Madison knew? I asked. Thomas smiled grimly and produced a series of emails. Your sister isn't as clever as she thinks. She sent multiple emails to your parents referencing Caitlin's pot of gold and reminding them that what she doesn't know won't hurt her. This one here explicitly states, just keep her in the dark until we've set ourselves up properly. The betrayal deepened with each document. Not only had they stolen from me, they'd conspired together to do it. While I'd been working myself to exhaustion, proud of being independent and never asking for help, they'd been helping themselves to my inheritance. What about the bank? I asked. How did no one notice? Your parents had themselves listed as trustees with full authority, Thomas explained. Banks don't typically question trustees, especially parents. They filed all the required paperwork to make it look legitimate. The only reason this is illegal is that they never notified you when you turned 25 and never transferred the assets. I thought about all the times my mother had cried about their financial struggles, the guilt trips about how hard they'd worked to raise us, the subtle comments about how lucky I was to have a good job while they struggled. All of it had been performance art designed to keep me from asking questions while they plundered my inheritance. There's sufficient evidence here for criminal charges, Thomas said carefully. Breach of fiduciary duty at minimum, likely fraud and embezzlement as well. The question is, what do you want to do? I stared at the evidence of their calculated betrayal. They hadn't just taken my money, they'd taken my grandmother's final gift to me. Eleanor Whitman had built her business empire from nothing, working 18-hour days in her bakery, saving every penny to leave something for her grandchildren. She'd trusted her son and daughter-in-law to protect that legacy for me. Instead, they'd treated it like their personal piggy bank funding Madison's dreams, while I struggled to pay off student loans they knew I didn't need to carry. Every sacrifice I'd made, every overtime shift I'd worked, every vacation I'd skipped to save money, all of it unnecessary if they'd simply given me what was mine. The cruelest irony, I'd just liquidated my entire retirement to save them from a crisis they'd created by stealing from me in the first place. They'd taken my inheritance, spent it on Madison, nearly lost their house as a result, then manipulated me into bankrupting myself to save them. And now they wouldn't even let me come to Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving morning arrived with an Instagram notification that made my blood run cold. Madison had posted a series of photos from our parents' house, each one carefully curated to twist the knife deeper. The dining room table was set with grandmother Eleanor's china, the pieces I'd been promised since childhood. The kitchen counter displayed all the traditional dishes I usually prepared, but it was the final photo that stopped my heart. Marcus stood beside Madison in our parents' living room, his arm wrapped around her waist, both of them beaming at the camera. My ex-fiancé, the man I'd planned to marry just 8 months ago, was spending Thanksgiving with my family as my sister's new boyfriend. The caption read, "Grateful for new beginnings and authentic love. Sometimes the best things come when you stop trying to control everything and just let life flow." I sank onto my couch phone, trembling in my hands. Marcus and I had been together for 5 years. We'd picked out engagement rings together. We'd put a deposit on a venue. Then suddenly, he'd called off the wedding, claiming he needed to find himself. Now I understood what he'd actually been looking for. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on my door an hour later, her face full of concern. "Caitlin, dear, I thought you should know. Your young man is at your parents' house, but he's with your sister. I'm confused." The texts began flooding in from other neighbors who'd seen Marcus's car in the driveway. Each message felt like another betrayal. These people had watched me grow up, had celebrated my engagement, had consoled me through the breakup. Now they were witnessing my humiliation in real time. I called my friend Sarah, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you know about Marcus and Madison?" Her silence spoke volumes before she finally answered. "I suspected something a few months ago. I saw them having coffee downtown. When I asked Madison about it, she said she was counseling him through your breakup. I wanted to tell you, but I had no proof." The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. Marcus had started pulling away right around the time I'd been working overtime on a major project. Madison had suddenly become interested in visiting me at work, something she'd never done before. She'd been scoping out my life, identifying my vulnerabilities, and moving in for the kill. Another Instagram story popped up. This time it was a video of Madison wearing the sapphire ring that had belonged to grandmother Eleanor, the one that was supposed to pass to the eldest granddaughter. She flashed it at the camera while Marcus kissed her cheek. "Some traditions are meant to be broken," Madison's voice sang out. "This ring looks better on a hand that knows how to hold on to love instead of pushing it away with control issues." The comments poured in from family, friends, and relatives. "You two are perfect together." "Madison, you're glowing." "Marcus upgraded for sure." Each comment felt like an endorsement of my erasure from the family. Then came the text from Marcus himself. "Caitlin, I hope you can be happy for us. Madison showed me what real unconditional love looks like. No spreadsheets, no 5-year plans, no constant pressure to be perfect, just acceptance. I'm finally free to be myself." I wanted to scream. The spreadsheets he mocked were budgets I'd created to save for our wedding, since he'd spent his savings on cryptocurrency that crashed. The 5-year plan was something we'd created together during premarital counseling. The pressure to be perfect was me asking him to keep a job for longer than 6 months. Another text followed. "By the way, Madison told me about your trust fund. It's sad that you've been lying to everyone about being self-made. At least now people know the truth about your success." My hands clenched. They'd twisted even this discovery into ammunition against me. Madison was spreading the narrative that I'd known about the trust all along, that I'd been pretending to struggle while sitting on millions. The truth, that they'd stolen from me for 7 years, was conveniently omitted. Mrs. Chen returned an hour later with updates from the neighborhood watch. "Your mother is telling everyone how grateful she is that Madison brought Marcus into the fold. She called him the son she never had. I'm sorry, dear. This must be so painful." The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had gained a son while losing their daughter, and they seemed perfectly content with the trade. Marcus, who'd contributed nothing but broken promises and empty dreams, was now the golden child by association with Madison. As the day progressed, more photos appeared. Madison in an apron I'd given my mother carving the turkey I'd usually prepare. Marcus pouring wine from the special bottles I'd gifted my parents last Christmas. The two of them slow dancing in the living room where I'd announced my engagement 2 years ago. Every image was perfectly staged to show Madison living the life I was supposed to have. She wasn't just taking my place at the table, she was systematically replacing me in every family role and tradition. The devoted daughter, the one bringing home a partner, the keeper of family heirlooms, the host of gatherings. My phone rang. It was my father. For a moment, hope fluttered that he might be calling to make things right. Instead, his voice was cold and formal. "Caitlin, we need you to stop spreading lies about the trust fund. Marcus told us what you said. It's beneath you to make up stories just because your sister found happiness. We raised you better than this." The line went dead before I could respond. They'd completed the circle. Not only had they stolen from me, not only had they cast me out, but now they were gaslighting me into being the villain of the story. Madison had given them the perfect narrative, the bitter, lying older sister who couldn't handle her younger siblings' happiness. I sat in my empty apartment surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, while 5 miles away my family celebrated Thanksgiving with my ex-fiancé and the sister who'd orchestrated my downfall. The turkey I'd ordered weeks ago sat untouched in my refrigerator. The pie I'd baked out of habit cooled on my counter. Everything I'd prepared for a celebration I'd been barred from attending. But as I looked at Thomas Chen's investigative report on my coffee table, a different kind of satisfaction began to build. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd quietly accept my exile and let them rewrite history. They had no idea that while they were performing their happy family charade, I was preparing to expose every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Madison might be wearing my grandmother's ring today, but she wouldn't be wearing it for long. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I sat in the law offices of Hartley Brennan and Associates, watching as attorney Jessica Hartley's expression grew increasingly grim with each document she reviewed. Thomas Chen had recommended her as the best financial fraud attorney in the state, and her reputation for taking down family con artists was legendary. "This is one of the most comprehensive cases of family fraud I've seen," she said, organizing the evidence into neat stacks. "But Caitlin, I need to warn you about something else we've discovered." She pulled out a new folder that made my stomach drop. "Your parents didn't just steal from the trust. They've been committing identity theft for years." The credit reports she spread before me showed a disaster I'd been completely unaware of. 14 credit cards opened in my name over the past 5 years, personal loans totaling $380,000, business credit lines for ventures I'd never heard of, all of them in default or near default. "How did I not know about this?" I whispered, staring at the carnage of my credit history. "They had everything sent to a P.O. box," Jessica explained. "They used your social security number, your employment information, even forged your signature. Look at this application date. It's when you were traveling to Singapore for that business conference. They knew you'd be unreachable." Each page revealed new violations. They'd used my excellent credit score to secure loan after loan funding Madison's failed businesses and their own spending sprees. The debt they'd accumulated in my name was staggering. This loan here, Jessica pointed to one document, was supposedly for a food truck business. The LLC is registered under your name, but the operating address, it's Madison's apartment. She's been running businesses under your identity. My hands shook as I recognized Madison's handwriting on the applications. She hadn't just known about the fraud, she'd been an active participant. While I'd been building my career honestly, she'd been building her schemes on the foundation of my stolen identity. "There's more," Jessica continued relentlessly. "The IRS has been trying to reach you about unreported income from these businesses. Your parents have been intercepting the notices. You're currently under investigation for tax evasion on income you never received from businesses you never ran." The room spun. This went beyond family betrayal. This was systematic, premeditated destruction of my entire financial life. While I'd been focused on the emotional pain of being excluded from Thanksgiving, they'd been betting I'd never discover the extent of their crimes. "Can we prove all this?" I asked. Jessica smiled for the first time. "Not only can we prove it, but the FBI is already investigating. Once I file these reports, your parents and Madison will be facing federal charges. Identity theft, wire fraud, tax fraud, credit fraud. We're talking about serious prison time." She pulled out another document. "This email chain we found is particularly damning. Madison explicitly tells your parents, 'Keep Caitlin busy with her job while we set up the infrastructure. By the time she notices, we'll be untouchable.' Your mother responds, 'Just make sure nothing comes to the house. She still checks our mail when she visits.'" The premeditation was staggering. Every Sunday dinner I'd attended, every holiday I'd celebrated with them, they'd been actively destroying my life behind my back. When my mother had hugged me and told me how proud she was of my success, she'd been planning her next fraud. When my father had given me advice about saving for retirement, he'd been draining accounts in my name. "What about the trust fund?" I asked. "That's actually the easiest part," Jessica said. "The forensic accountants have already traced every penny. Your parents will have to pay back everything they took, plus interest, plus penalties. We're looking at close to $4 million in restitution, and that's before we add damages for the identity theft." I thought about their house, the one I'd just saved from foreclosure. They don't have that kind of money. No, but they have assets. The house, their retirement accounts, vehicles. Everything will be liquidated. And Madison. Those failed businesses may not have made money, but she's been living quite well. That luxury apartment, the designer goods, the jewelry, all purchased with stolen funds, all recoverable. Jessica leaned forward. Caitlin, I need to ask you something important. Once we file these charges, there's no going back. Your parents will likely face 5 to 7 years in federal prison. Madison could get up to 10 years as the primary perpetrator of the identity theft. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the text message that had started this revelation, how coldly they'd dismissed me after I'd saved them, how Madison had smiled while stealing my life piece by piece, how they'd welcomed my ex-fiancé into the family while painting me as the villain. File everything, I said firmly. They made their choice when they decided I was worth less than money. Now they can face the consequences. Jessica nodded approvingly. There's one more thing. Given the evidence of premeditation and the likelihood they'll try to flee or hide assets, we're requesting an emergency asset freeze. By tomorrow morning, every account they have access to will be locked down. As I signed the paperwork authorizing the legal assault, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. For years, I'd carried the weight of being the responsible daughter, the one who fixed everything, who never complained, who gave endlessly. Now I understood why it had never been enough. You can't fill a bucket with no bottom, and my family had been nothing but a void, consuming everything I gave while secretly taking even more. When will they know? I asked. The asset freeze will hit tomorrow. The FBI will serve warrants by end of week. I suggest you prepare for significant backlash. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I thought about my empty apartment now, understanding why Marcus had really left. He'd seen an easier path with Madison, one paved with stolen money and no accountability. Let them have each other. They deserved the future they'd built on lies and theft. I'll be fine, I said. For the first time in my life, I'm going to be just fine. As I left the law office, my phone buzzed with another Instagram post from Madison. She was showing off a new designer purse captioned, "Some sisters are jealous of success. I'm just grateful for parents who believe in my dreams." I smiled grimly. By tomorrow, those parents would have their accounts frozen. By next week, they'd be in federal custody. And that purse, it would be evidence in a federal fraud case. Madison thought she'd won by taking my place at Thanksgiving dinner. She had no idea she'd actually carved herself a seat at a very different kind of table, the defendant's chair in federal court. 2 days after filing the federal charges, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was deep, steady, and hauntingly familiar. "Caitlin, it's Jason, my brother." I hadn't heard from him in 14 years, not since he'd packed a single duffel bag and disappeared on his 18th birthday, leaving only a note that said, "I can't do this anymore." My parents had painted him as ungrateful, unstable, a failure who couldn't handle family responsibilities. Madison had been too young to remember him clearly, but I'd never forgotten the brother who'd taught me to ride a bike and defended me from schoolyard bullies. "Jason," my voice cracked. Where have you been?" "I've been watching Caitlin. I saw Madison's live stream from your office. I've been waiting for you to finally see what I saw 14 years ago." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown. I barely recognized the man who walked in. The skinny teenager had become a successful-looking professional in a well-tailored suit. His face was older, harder, but his eyes still held the kindness I remembered. "You look good," I said inadequately. "So do you, considering what they're putting you through." He sat down, placing a thick folder on the table between us. "I've been waiting for this moment for years, waiting for you to be ready to hear the truth." "What truth, Jason? Why did you leave?" His jaw tightened. "Because I discovered what they were doing to Uncle Carl." Uncle Carl, our mother's brother who died by suicide when I was 20. The family tragedy no one discussed. My hands went cold. "Uncle Carl didn't just have financial problems," Jason continued. "Our parents systematically destroyed him. I found the paperwork when I was 17. They'd done the same thing to him that they're doing to you now. Identity theft, fraudulent loans, gaslighting when he tried to confront them. They drove him to bankruptcy and madness. I stared at the documents Jason spread before me. Loan applications in Uncle Carl's name with my mother's handwriting. Credit cards he'd never applied for. Business ventures he'd never started. The pattern was identical to what they'd done to me. When I confronted them, Jason said they convinced the family I was having a mental breakdown, said I was making up conspiracy theories. Sound familiar? I had two choices: stay and end up like Uncle Carl, or run and protect myself. But why didn't you warn me? Pain flashed across his face. I tried. Do you remember the birthday card I sent you when you turned 21? The one that said, "Always verify before you trust." The letter I mailed when you got engaged, warning you to keep your finances separate. Every attempt I made, they intercepted or twisted. They told everyone I was harassing the family. He pulled out more papers. I've been building a case for years, hiring investigators, documenting their patterns. Look at this. Cousin Marie's bankruptcy 5 years ago. They were behind it. Aunt Dorothy's mysterious debt that you helped pay off. Check whose name was really on those loans. The scope of my parents' crimes expanded before my eyes. They weren't just con artists who'd targeted their children. They were serial predators who'd been destroying family members for decades. Each victim had been isolated, discredited, and ultimately ruined, while the rest of the family was manipulated into compliance. There are others, Jason said quietly. 3 cousins who cut contact with the family, a great aunt who died penniless despite inheriting wealth. All of them discovered what our parents really are. All of them were branded as crazy or ungrateful when they tried to expose it. How did they get away with it for so long? Because they're smart about choosing victims. They pick the successful ones, the ones with good credit and stable incomes. They act loving and supportive while secretly destroying you. By the time you notice, you're too deep in debt and too isolated to fight back. Uncle Carl tried to prosecute, but who believes the mentally unstable brother over the respectable suburban couple? Jason leaned forward. But you're different, Caitlin. You have something none of their other victims had: evidence and timing. The FBI is already involved. The pattern is documented, and most importantly, you're not alone anymore. He introduced me to his lawyer, David Brennan, who'd been working with Jessica Hartley behind the scenes. We've been preparing for this day, David explained. Jason always believed eventually they'd overreach and target the wrong person. When Jessica called about your case, we knew it was time. The network Jason had built was impressive. Former victims willing to testify. Financial forensics experts who'd traced decades of fraud. Even a criminal psychologist who'd studied the patterns of family financial predators. Madison is the key, Jason explained. She's sloppy where our parents are careful. Her ego makes her document everything on social media. Those posts where she brags about her lifestyle, we've matched every purchase to fraudulent transactions. That live stream at your office, she inadvertently confessed to multiple crimes on camera. I thought about Madison's carefully curated online presence. Every designer bag, every luxury vacation, every failed business venture proudly displayed. She'd been building her own prosecution case with every post. There's something else, Jason said carefully. I've been in contact with Marcus's family. Turns out Madison has been bleeding him too. She's convinced him to take out loans for her new business venture. His parents are worried but didn't know how to approach you. Another piece clicked into place. Madison hadn't just stolen my fiancé for emotional revenge. She'd acquired a new financial victim. Marcus, who'd always been terrible with money, was probably signing documents he didn't understand, just as I once had. What's our next move? I asked. We go public, Jason said. Not in a sensational way, but strategically. There's a reporter who specializes in family fraud cases. She's been investigating our parents for months. Once the arrests happen, the story breaks. Every victim gets their vindication. Every family member who enabled them faces the truth. I looked at my brother, this stranger who'd been protecting me from afar for over a decade. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry you had to face this alone. You weren't ready then, he said simply. You needed to become who you are now. Successful enough to survive their betrayal, strong enough to fight back. I just wish it hadn't cost you so much. As we prepared to leave, Jason pulled out one last document. There's a victim fund being established. Once the assets are recovered and liquidated, every person they defrauded will be compensated. Uncle Carl's daughter will finally get her father's inheritance. Cousin Marie can rebuild, and you'll get back everything they stole plus damages. It's not about the money anymore, I said. No, Jason agreed. It's about justice and making sure they never do this to anyone again. That night, I sat with Jason in my apartment sharing stories of the years we'd lost. He told me about building his tech company from nothing, about the family he'd created with his wife and 2 children I'd never met. I told him about my career, my dreams, the life I'd built despite our parents' sabotage. Do you regret leaving? I asked. I regret leaving you, he said. But staying would have killed me just like it killed Uncle Carl. Sometimes the only way to love yourself is to walk away from people who claim to love you while destroying you. As he prepared to leave, promising to return the next day with more evidence, I realized something profound. Madison had thought she was isolating me by turning the family against me. Instead, she'd freed me to find my true family. The brother who'd been guarding me from the shadows, the professionals who'd believed my story, the friends who'd stood by me despite the lies. The family I'd lost at Thanksgiving was nothing compared to the alliance I was building now. And unlike my parents' foundation of lies, ours was built on truth, justice, and the kind of loyalty that doesn't require payment. While I'd been building my legal case and reuniting with Jason, my former family had been celebrating their perceived victory. What they didn't know was that my friend Sarah had attended their Thanksgiving dinner as a +1 of their neighbor strategically positioned to gather intelligence. The day after my meeting with Jason, she showed up at my apartment with a flash drive and an expression of disgusted fury. "You need to see this," she said, plugging the drive into my laptop. "I recorded everything on my phone. They had no idea I was your friend. Your parents never paid attention to your life enough to recognize me." The video started innocuously enough. The dining room table laden with food, family members chatting, Madison playing hostess in an apron embroidered with "Blessed and Grateful," an anniversary gift I'd given our mother 5 years ago. But as the meal progressed, the conversation turned to me and the mask slipped completely off. Madison, slightly drunk on wine, was holding court at the head of the table. "You should have seen Caitlin's face when security dragged me out." She laughed, gesturing dramatically, like she'd seen a ghost, all those executives watching their perfect consultant fall apart. I bet she's never getting that promotion now. The family members laughed along, each adding their own cruel observation. Aunt Dorothy chimed in. She always thought she was better than everyone with that fancy job. About time someone took her down a peg. My mother nodded approvingly. We did her a favor, really. All that money was making her impossible. Now maybe she'll learn some humility. The best part, Madison continued refilling her glass, is that she actually believes she gave us $650,000. Mom, tell them how much it really was. My mother smirked. 70,000. The rest came from other sources. But let her think she's some kind of savior. It keeps her from asking questions. Sarah's camera caught my father's uncomfortable shift, but he said nothing to correct the lie. They were openly admitting to everyone that they'd deceived me about the amount, letting me believe I'd sacrificed my entire retirement when I'd only provided a fraction of what they'd claimed they needed. Marcus laughed along with the rest. She tried to control every aspect of our relationship with those spreadsheets and plans. Thank God Madison showed me what real spontaneity looks like. "Oh, honey." Madison cooed. Caitlin never understood that love isn't about planning. It's about passion. Speaking of which, she raised her glass. "I have an announcement." The table fell silent as Madison stood swaying slightly. Marcus and I are starting a new business together, a lifestyle brand that celebrates authentic living. No corporate nonsense, no spreadsheets, just pure entrepreneurial spirit. The family applauded while my stomach turned. Another business venture, another victim, another scheme. But then Madison said something that changed everything. And the best part, we already have our seed funding secured. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have the right resources. She winked at my parents, who smiled knowingly. Tell them about the plan, my mother encouraged. Madison's eyes gleamed with malice. Well, once Caitlin realizes she's lost everything, her family, her fiancé, probably her job, she'll be vulnerable, desperate. That's when we offer to help her, bring her back into the fold, but on our terms. Get her to sign a few documents for her own good, maybe give her power of attorney to help manage her obvious mental health crisis. She'll need looking after, my father added, finally speaking. After all, someone who gives away their entire savings clearly isn't mentally stable. We'll be doing her a favor by taking control of her finances. The table murmured agreement while Sarah's camera captured every word. They weren't satisfied with what they'd already stolen. They were planning to take everything I had left by having me declared mentally incompetent. But what if she fights back? Uncle Robert asked. Madison laughed. With what I've destroyed her reputation at work, the family thinks she's a controlling monster. Marcus will testify about her instability. By the time we're done, she'll be begging us to help her. It's for her own good, my mother insisted. Caitlin never knew how to enjoy life. Always working, always planning, never spontaneous. Once we have control, we can teach her how to really live. The irony of criminals who'd stolen millions talking about teaching me how to live was staggering. But the video wasn't done with revelations. Show them the ring, baby, Marcus said, and Madison flashed grandmother Eleanor's sapphire. It's beautiful, Aunt Patricia cooed. Eleanor always said it would go to the eldest granddaughter. Well, Madison smirked, she never met me. Besides, Caitlin wouldn't appreciate it. She'd probably just lock it in a safety deposit box instead of wearing it. Some people don't understand that beautiful things are meant to be enjoyed. Like the trust fund, my mother added, then caught herself. But the wine had loosened her tongue too much. What trust fund? A cousin asked. My parents exchanged looks, but Madison was too drunk to notice their warning. Oh, Caitlin's trying to claim Grandma Eleanor left her some trust fund. Complete fantasy, of course. She's making up stories to make us look bad, as if we'd ever keep something like that from her. The lie was so smooth, so confident that even I might have believed it if I hadn't seen the evidence. But Sarah's camera caught something else. Jason's ex-girlfriend's mother, Patricia Stern, sitting at the far end of the table, her expression troubled. She knew something. As the dinner continued, more revelations spilled out. They discussed their plans to sell certain items from the house, items I now realized were probably mine by rights. They laughed about the cousin whose credit they'd destroyed. They even joked about Uncle Carl calling him too sensitive to handle family business. The final straw came during dessert. Madison pulled out her phone to show off her latest Instagram post, a photo of the whole family gathered around the table with the caption, "Thankful for family who shows their love through actions, not control. Sometimes you have to cut out the toxic people to let the healthy ones flourish." How many likes? My mother asked eagerly. Over 3,000. And look at these comments. Everyone agrees Caitlin was the problem. I've had 6 people reach out privately to share their own stories of controlling siblings. They were turning me into a cautionary tale, a social media villain to fuel their narrative. But in their arrogance and intoxication, they'd revealed their entire playbook. Sarah had recorded everything. The admission of fraud, the plan to have me declared incompetent, the acknowledgement of the trust fund they claimed didn't exist, even their casual cruelty about Uncle Carl's death. "I need to use the restroom," Sarah said on the video, and the recording shifted. She'd found my father's study and quickly filmed visible documents on his desk, bank statements, legal papers, correspondence with lawyers. One envelope caught her attention. Caitlin Whitman conservatorship proceedings. They'd already started the legal process to gain control of my life. The video ended with Sarah returning to the dining room in time to hear Madison's final toast. To family, the ones who matter anyway, And to Caitlin, may she find the help she clearly needs, preferably far away from us. The room erupted in laughter and clinking glasses. I sat in stunned silence after the video ended. Sarah squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry you had to see that, but you needed to know what you're really dealing with. They're monsters, I whispered. Yes, she agreed, but they're stupid monsters. They just confessed to multiple crimes on camera. Jessica is going to have a field day with this. I thought about my family sitting around that table celebrating my destruction while planning to steal even more. They'd taken my money, my fiancé, my reputation, and now they wanted my freedom. The parents who were supposed to protect me were plotting to have me declared incompetent. The sister I'd helped raise was orchestrating my complete destruction. The family I'd sacrificed for was toasting to my downfall. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was alone, broken, defeated. They had no idea that while they'd been recording their cruelty on Instagram, Sarah had been recording their crimes in high definition. While they'd been planning my conservatorship, I'd been building a federal case. While they'd been toasting to my exile, Jason and I had been preparing for war. Send the video to Jessica and Jason. I said, my voice steady now. And Sarah, thank you. You risked a lot going there. That's what real family does, she said simply. We show up. As she left, I realized the truth in her words. My blood family had shown me who they really were that Thanksgiving. But my chosen family, Sarah, Jason, even Jessica and Thomas, had shown me something far more powerful, that love isn't about DNA or obligation. It's about choosing to stand by someone when standing by them costs you something. Madison thought she'd won by stealing my seat at the Thanksgiving table. She had no idea she'd actually given me the greatest gift possible, freedom from the delusion that they'd ever really loved me at all. The following week brought an unexpected turn when Richard Steinberg called me into his office. I'd been dreading this meeting since Madison's public spectacle, certain it would end with my termination. Instead, Richard gestured for me to sit and pulled out a folder that made my pulse quicken. Caitlin, I need to discuss something with you. After your sister's performance, I had our security team do some digging. What they found is quite interesting. He spread out several documents across his mahogany desk. My heart nearly stopped when I recognized them. Employment applications, background check forms, reference letters, all bearing Madison's name and all claiming credentials she didn't possess. Your sister applied to our firm 6 months ago, Richard continued. She listed you as a reference without your knowledge, claimed to have an MBA from Wharton, and provided falsified employment history with 3 Fortune 500 companies. Our HR flagged it immediately as fraudulent. I stared at the papers, seeing Madison's elaborate lies spelled out in black and white. She'd claimed to be a senior financial analyst at companies that had never heard of her. The recommendation letters were forgeries. Even her undergraduate degree was fabricated. She dropped out of community college after 1 semester. And there's more, Richard said, pulling out another set of documents. She's applied to 12 other firms in the city using similar false credentials. Each application lists different references, different educational backgrounds, but always claims extensive experience in financial consulting. She's been trying to infiltrate your professional world for months. The pattern was clear now. Madison hadn't just wanted my family and fiancé. She'd been systematically trying to invade every aspect of my life, including my career. The office confrontation hadn't been spontaneous. It had been revenge for being rejected by the professional world I'd worked so hard to enter. Why are you showing me this? I asked carefully. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me. Because I've been where you are. 20 years ago, my brother tried to destroy my career out of jealousy. I know what it's like to have family become your worst enemy. But I also know something else. The best revenge is spectacular success. He pulled out one final document. This is a cease and desist letter our legal department has prepared. If Madison comes within 500 feet of our building, she'll be arrested. If she continues to use fraudulent credentials claiming association with our firm, we'll prosecute. But that's not why I really called you in. Richard stood and walked to his window overlooking the city. The Morrison Industries deal isn't dead. In fact, Charles Morrison called me personally after your sister's stunt. He was impressed by how you handled yourself under extreme pressure. He said anyone who could maintain composure during that level of personal attack was exactly the kind of person he wanted managing his accounts. My hands trembled as I processed this reversal. He still wants to work with us. With you specifically, but there's a condition. He wants to know you have the full support of this firm, so I'm prepared to make you an offer. Richard returned to his desk and slid a contract across to me. Senior partner, your own team, and full autonomy over your accounts. The youngest senior partner in our firm's history. I stared at the contract, seeing a salary that would make recovering from my financial losses much easier. But more than that, I saw vindication. Madison had tried to destroy my career, and instead she'd inadvertently advanced it. There's one more thing, Richard added. Morrison Industries isn't the only one who took notice. 3 other major clients have specifically requested you handle their accounts. They said they want someone who's been tested by fire and didn't break. I thought about the humiliation I'd felt that day, the whispers from colleagues, the fear that everything I'd built was crumbling. Now those same colleagues would be reporting to me. Your sister's performance was actually caught on our security cameras as well, Richard mentioned casually. High definition, multiple angles. Our legal team has been wondering if it might be useful for any proceedings you might be involved in. Another gift. Corporate-grade security footage would be invaluable for the criminal case. I don't know what to say, I managed. Say yes, Richard smiled. Then get back to work. Morrison wants to sign by end of week, and I have full confidence you'll close the deal. As I left his office contract in hand, I passed the conference room where Madison had staged her attack. The space that had seemed like a crime scene now felt like a battlefield where I'd unknowingly won. Every colleague I passed offered congratulations. News of my promotion had already spread. That evening, I called Jason to share the news. He laughed a sound I was still getting used to hearing again. She handed you the perfect lawsuit for defamation and career interference. Between the live stream and the security footage, we can prove damages and malicious intent. Jessica's adding it to the civil suit. How much are we talking about? With your promotion as evidence of what your career trajectory should be, millions. Madison didn't just fail to destroy you, she's going to fund your future success. I thought about the irony. Madison had spent her life failing at businesses funded by stolen money. Her first successful venture would be inadvertently financing my rise to the top of my field. Marcus called while I was reviewing the Morrison presentation. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. His voice was different, strained, uncertain. Caitlin, I think I've made a terrible mistake. Madison, she's not who I thought she was. She's been pressuring me to take out business loans, and my parents found some concerning documents. That's not my problem anymore, Marcus. I know. I wanted to warn you. She keeps talking about some plan for after the holidays. Something about having you declared incompetent I thought you should know. Already handled, I said coolly. And Marcus, you might want to check your credit report and maybe hire a lawyer. The silence on his end stretched before he whispered, "What have I done?" You traded a partner who tried to protect your financial future for one who's actively destroying it. Good luck with that spontaneity you wanted so much. I hung up without waiting for a response. Marcus had chosen his path, and now he could walk it alone. The next morning brought more good news. 3 of Madison's fraud victims had come forward after seeing her live stream go viral. They recognized their con artist and were eager to cooperate with authorities. Each had documentation of her schemes, adding to our ever-growing pile of evidence. Patricia Stern, who'd looked troubled at Thanksgiving dinner, reached out through Jason. She'd been suspicious of my parents for years and had quietly documented inconsistencies in their stories. Her records included photos of documents she'd seen in their home, including references to my trust fund dating back years. By week's end, I'd closed the Morrison deal and 2 others. My new team was in place. My office had been upgraded to a corner suite, and my professional reputation had not only recovered, but soared. The woman who'd walked into work the Monday after Thanksgiving, broken and humiliated, was gone. In her place stood someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more powerful. Madison had wanted to prove she was better than me. Instead, she'd proven that sometimes your enemies do you the greatest favor by forcing you to discover your own strength. She'd aimed to destroy my career and accidentally launched it into the stratosphere. But the best part, she had no idea what was coming. While Madison was posting inspirational quotes about authenticity and new beginnings, federal agents were preparing warrants. While she was planning her lifestyle brand with my ex-fiancé, asset freezes were being processed. While she was wearing my grandmother's ring and sleeping in sheets bought with stolen money, the walls were closing in. Richard had been right. The best revenge wasn't anger or retaliation. It was spectacular success achieved while your enemies were still celebrating their imaginary victory. 2 weeks after my promotion, the arrests happened. Federal agents descended on my parents' house at 6 a.m, serving warrants for fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and conspiracy. A neighbor caught the whole thing on their doorbell camera. My mother in her bathrobe screaming about persecution, my father silent and gray-faced as they were led away in handcuffs. Madison's arrest at her luxury apartment was even more dramatic. She'd attempted to flee through the back entrance but was caught in the parking garage. The designer bags she'd tried to take with her were seized as evidence, each one purchased with stolen funds. By noon, the story had broken across local news. Reporter Dana Chen, who'd been investigating financial fraud for years, had the exclusive. She'd worked with Jason for months, gathering evidence and interviewing victims. The segment that aired was devastating in its thoroughness. A shocking pattern of family fraud spanning decades. Dana began standing outside my parents' house. What started as an investigation into identity theft has uncovered a web of deception affecting at least 12 victims over 25 years. The report included interviews with victims I'd never known existed. Cousin Marie broke down describing how she'd lost her business and nearly became homeless. An elderly great-aunt revealed she'd been bilked out of her entire savings. Most devastating was the interview with Uncle Carl's daughter, Emma, who spoke publicly for the first time about her father's death. He tried to tell people what was happening. Emma said, tears streaming, but they were so good at making him look unstable. By the time anyone believed him, it was too late. He left me a letter explaining everything, but I was too young and scared to act on it then. The news showed Madison's Instagram posts side by side with bank records showing the fraudulent transactions that funded each purchase. Her carefully curated lifestyle was exposed as a criminal enterprise built on family betrayal. Then came the corporate fraud revelations. 3 business owners came forward describing how Madison had conned them with fake credentials and promises of connections through her successful consultant sister. The total damages were staggering. But the most damaging revelation came from an unexpected source. Marcus's mother, Elizabeth Morrison, gave an exclusive interview. I hadn't known Marcus's family owned Morrison Industries. He'd always claimed to be estranged from them due to their obsession with money. My son has always been vulnerable to manipulation, Elizabeth said carefully. When he met Madison at what we now know was a calculated encounter, she immediately began isolating him from family and friends who might warn him. She's currently pressuring him to take out significant loans for another fraudulent business venture. The reporter pressed for details about Madison's methods. Elizabeth's response was chilling. She studies her targets. She knew my son had been engaged to Caitlin, so she researched everything about their relationship. She presented herself as everything Caitlin wasn't. Spontaneous, carefree, non-judgmental about his financial irresponsibility. It was a carefully crafted persona designed to exploit his weaknesses. The interview cut to security footage from Marcus's apartment building, showing Madison going through his mail photographing documents and even accessing his laptop while he slept. His family had hired private investigators when they became suspicious, and the evidence was damning. Dana Chen returned on screen with breaking news. We've just received word that Madison Whitman has been denied bail due to flight risk. Prosecutors say she had tickets booked under an alias and was attempting to transfer funds offshore when arrested. The community response was immediate and harsh. The church my parents had attended for 30 years released a statement distancing themselves and revealing that funds raised for a mission trip had mysteriously disappeared. Their country club revoked their membership after discovering years of unpaid dues covered by bad checks. Neighbors who defended them were calling reporters with their own suspicious stories. Sarah called me as I watched the coverage from my office. "Check Madison's Instagram," she said. Madison's account had exploded with comments from victims and supporters of victims. Every post where she'd flaunted stolen goods was flooded with angry responses. Someone had created a spreadsheet tracking each purchase to its fraudulent funding source. The lifestyle brand announcement with Marcus had thousands of comments warning him to run. But the most satisfying moment came when Dana Chen interviewed me outside the courthouse. I'd prepared carefully with Jessica, knowing this moment would define public perception. "Caitlin, your family has painted you as controlling and vindictive. How do you respond?" I looked directly into the camera, thinking of every victim who'd been silenced and discredited. For years, I believed love meant giving everything without question. I thought family meant accepting behavior that I'd never tolerate from strangers. What I've learned is that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. And when family becomes your enemy, you have the right to protect yourself. What would you say to other victims of family financial fraud? You're not crazy. You're not ungrateful. You're not alone. Document everything, seek legal help, and remember, blood doesn't give anyone the right to destroy your life. The interview went viral within hours. Messages flooded in from people sharing their own stories of family betrayal. A hashtag began trending, "Family Fraud Survivor." The narrative Madison had tried to control was completely out of her hands. That evening, Jason and I met with the other victims at a restaurant downtown. For the first time, Uncle Carl's daughter, Emma, could speak freely about her father. Cousin Marie shared her recovery journey. Others told stories that made my experience seem mild by comparison. "They always use the same playbook," Patricia Stern observed. She'd compiled years of observations into a pattern. Isolate the victim, discredit them to other family members, create financial chaos while maintaining a respectable facade, then gaslight anyone who asks questions. The worst part, Marie added, was how they made me doubt myself. I spent years thinking I was the failure, that I was bad with money, that I deserved what happened. We sat around that table, a dozen victims spanning 3 generations, and found strength in shared truth. The family that had rejected us for refusing to be victims had inadvertently created a stronger bond between us than blood ever could. As we prepared to leave, Emma raised her glass. "To Uncle Carl, he tried to warn us all. Tonight he's finally vindicated." We toasted to a man whose death had been dismissed as weakness, but who'd actually been the first to fight back. His daughter's testimony would be crucial in the trial, finally giving voice to the victim they'd silenced permanently. The next morning brought more revelations. A forensic accountant being interviewed on a financial crimes podcast had analyzed the public evidence. This is one of the most sophisticated family fraud operations I've seen. The fact that they operated for decades shows how powerful family loyalty can be in silencing victims. It often takes an outside force, like federal investigation, to break these patterns. The host asked about recovery for victims. Financial recovery is possible through criminal restitution and civil suits, but the emotional recovery is often harder. These victims have to rebuild their entire understanding of family. I turned off the podcast as my assistant knocked. Morrison Industries had sent a gift basket with a note from Charles Morrison. "Integrity under pressure is rare. We're lucky to have you on our team." But the day's biggest surprise came when Jessica called with news. Madison broke. She's trying to make a deal. She wants to testify against your parents in exchange for a lighter sentence. The irony was perfect. The family who'd operated on blind loyalty was turning on each other the moment consequences arrived. Madison was abandoning the parents who'd enabled her crimes just as they'd abandoned me after taking my money. "What's she offering?" I asked. "Full documentation of your parents' crimes going back 30 years, hidden bank accounts, other victims we don't know about. She's claiming they masterminded everything while she was just a pawn." "Do we need her testimony?" "No," Jessica said firmly. "We have enough to convict everyone, but her testimony would ensure maximum sentences for your parents and reveal any hidden assets we've missed." I thought about my parents sitting in federal custody learning their golden child was betraying them to save herself. They'd created a monster who operated by their own rules, loyalty only until it cost something. Let her talk, I decided. Let them all tear each other apart. That night, alone in my apartment, I reflected on the journey from that 2 a.m. text to this moment of public vindication. The family who'd cast me out for setting boundaries was now exposed as a criminal enterprise. The sister who'd stolen my seat at Thanksgiving was preparing to testify against the parents who'd enabled her. The relatives who'd believed their lies were reaching out with apologies I didn't need or want. But most importantly, the truth was finally free. Every victim had been heard. Every lie had been exposed. Every stolen dollar was being traced and would be returned with interest. The local news ended with an update. Federal prosecutors were recommending 15 to 20 years for my parents and 10 to 12 for Madison pending her cooperation. The reporter noted this was one of the harshest sentences ever recommended for family financial fraud, reflecting the decades of damage and multiple victims. I turned off the television and opened my laptop to find hundreds of emails from family fraud victims around the world. Each one thanked me for going public, for fighting back, for showing them they weren't alone. Madison had wanted to destroy my reputation. Instead, she'd made me a symbol of survival and justice. The family who'd tried to erase me had instead written me into the headlines as the woman who brought down a decades-old criminal conspiracy. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more interviews, more uncomfortable truths for those who'd enabled my family's crimes. But tonight I sat in peaceful silence, knowing that Uncle Carl was finally at rest and his truth had set us all free. The call from Marcus came at midnight 3 weeks after the arrests. His voice was broken, desperate nothing, like the confident man who'd toasted to his freedom at my family's Thanksgiving table. "Caitlin, I need help. I know I don't deserve it, but I don't know who else to call. Madison, she's destroyed everything." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a 24-hour diner. The man who walked in looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His designer clothes were rumpled, his face gaunt, his hands shaking as he slid into the booth across from me. "My parents had to get a restraining order against me," he began without preamble. "Madison convinced me they were controlling, that they were the reason our relationship failed. She said they tried to buy you off to leave me." I almost laughed at the irony. "Your mother is Elizabeth Morrison. I had no idea until I saw her interview. You told me your family was middle class, that you were estranged because they were materialistic." Madison coached me on what to say. She said rich people like you would never respect someone who came from money but didn't earn it themselves. She helped me craft this whole identity as a self-made man struggling against family expectations. The layers of deception were staggering. "So everything about your background was a lie?" "Everything. My parents offered to pay for our wedding. I told you they couldn't afford to help. They wanted to buy us a house as a wedding gift. I said they were trying to control us with money. Every fight we had about finances, Madison was feeding me lines the whole time." He pulled out his phone, showing me message after message between him and Madison dating back over a year. She'd been coaching him on how to undermine our relationship long before I knew she existed in his life. "Look at this one," he said, scrolling to a conversation from 6 months before our wedding was called off. Madison had written, "Tell her you need space to find yourself. Rich girls eat that spiritual journey stuff up. Once you're free, we can implement phase 2. Phase 2. getting access to your family's money. She researched everything, your grandmother's business, the trust fund, your parents' assets. She knew about the inheritance before you did. The plan was for me to get back together with you after the trust transferred claim, half in an eventual divorce. My stomach turned. But you didn't know I didn't have access to it. Neither did she at first. When she found out your parents controlled it, she pivoted, decided to go through them instead. But she needed me positioned as the heartbroken ex who'd moved on with the better sister. Everything at Thanksgiving, the ring, the photos, the social media posts, all calculated to hurt you so much you'd never suspect we were still targeting your money. Why are you telling me this now? Marcus laughed bitterly, because she's setting me up to take the fall. My signature is on loan documents I never signed, business partnerships I never agreed to. She's been using my family's name to run scams. When the feds came calling, guess whose door they knocked on? He showed me documents that made my blood run cold. Madison had forged his signature on loan applications totaling over $2 million. She'd used his family connections to approach investors with fraudulent opportunities. Every document positioned him as the mastermind while she appeared to be just the supportive girlfriend. She's claiming I manipulated her, Marcus continued, that I used my business knowledge to trick her into fronting these schemes. She's got emails from my account I never sent, documents on my computer I never created. She had complete access to everything. Your parents believe you. Now they do. Their security team found footage of her accessing my father's home office during a family dinner. She photographed confidential business documents, copied contact lists, even took pictures of his signature to forge. But the damage is done. Morrison Industries is facing a PR nightmare. Investors are nervous, all because I brought a con artist into our lives. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I destroyed us for her. I threw away 5 years, a woman who actually loved me, a real future, so for what? For someone who was using me from day one. What do you want from me, Marcus? Testify. Tell them about the messages she sent you from my phone, the emails from my account you know I didn't write. Help me prove she was the one running this con. I studied the man I'd once planned to marry. The betrayal still stung, but I could see now how Madison had played him like a virtuoso. She'd identified his weaknesses, his need to feel independent from his wealthy family, his jealousy of my career, success, his susceptibility to flattery, and exploited everyone. I'll give the evidence to my lawyer, I said finally. But Marcus, this doesn't absolve you. You chose to betray me. You chose to hurt me at that Thanksgiving dinner. Madison may have manipulated you, but you were a willing participant. I know, he whispered. I've lost everything. My family's trust, my reputation, my future, and for what Madison's already thrown me under the bus. She's telling everyone I corrupted her, that she was just a naive girl swept up by a rich man's promises. As if to underscore his point, his phone lit up with a news alert. Madison had given a jailhouse interview claiming Marcus had masterminded everything that she'd been blinded by love and manipulated into participating. She painted herself as a victim of both her parents' criminal influence and her boyfriend's deceptions. She's rewriting history again, Marcus said bitterly. Just like she did with your family. Soon everyone will believe I'm the villain and she's just another victim. But Madison had miscalculated. Within hours of her interview airing, 3 of Marcus's friends came forward with recordings of her bragging about her schemes. She'd been so confident in her control over him that she'd openly discussed her plans at social gatherings, never realizing his social circle had begun recording her after becoming suspicious. The next morning, Elizabeth Morrison gave another interview, this time with emails and documents, proving Madison had orchestrated the fraud. My son was foolish and weak, she said bluntly, but the evidence clearly shows who the architect of these crimes was. Madison studied our family like a predator studies prey. The public tide turned against Madison again. Her attempt to flip the narrative had failed spectacularly. But the damage to Marcus and his family was permanent. Morrison Industries stock dropped 12%. 3 major deals were put on hold. The reputation they'd built over decades was tarnished by association. That afternoon, Jason forwarded me screenshots from the jail's recorded phone calls. Madison had called our parents, and the conversation was pure poison. "This is your fault," she screamed at them. "You taught me that family was about taking what you needed. You showed me how to identify marks, how to isolate them, how to break them down. Everything I did, I learned from watching you." My mother's response was equally vicious. "We never taught you to be sloppy. You were supposed to be careful to maintain the facade. Instead, you got greedy, flashy, careless. You ruined everything." They went back and forth, each blaming the other, revealing more crimes in their fury. My father accused Madison of skimming from the stolen trust funds. Madison accused them of hiding money from her. The family of criminals was devouring itself. "Listen to this part," Jason said, forwarding another clip. Madison's voice was cold, calculating. "You want to know the truth? I was planning to turn you both in eventually anyway. Why should I share with you forever when I could have it all? Caitlin was just the first step. Once she was out of the way, you were next." The family loyalty they'd weaponized against their victims had never existed among themselves. They were just predators who'd temporarily aligned for mutual benefit, always planning to betray each other when the opportunity arose. By evening, the full scope of Marcus's situation became clear. The FBI had raided his apartment and found evidence Madison had planted to frame him completely. Forged documents, hidden bank accounts in his name, even a recorded conversation where his voice had been deep-faked, discussing criminal plans. He sent me one final text that night. "You tried to protect me from my own financial stupidity, and I called you controlling. She actively destroyed my life, and I called it love. I'm the fool everyone says I am." I didn't respond. Marcus would survive this with his family's resources and legal team. He'd learned an expensive lesson about the difference between someone trying to protect you and someone trying to possess you. But that was his journey now, not mine. The news cycle continued with revelation after revelation. Madison's former victims formed a support group. My parents' criminal history expanded to include elder abuse and charity fraud. The investigation spread to other family members who'd knowingly benefited from the crimes. But for me, the most significant moment came when Patricia Stern called with news. "I've been appointed as the victim's advocate for the asset recovery. Every penny stolen will be returned with interest and penalties. Your grandmother, Eleanor's trust, will be fully restored to you, plus damages for the years of theft." The financial recovery was beginning, but more importantly, the emotional chains were finally breaking. The family who'd made me feel worthless for setting boundaries had been exposed as worthless themselves. Their implosion was complete. Their secrets laid bare, their victims vindicated. That night, I sat with Jason and Sarah sharing Chinese takeout and watching news coverage of the family we'd lost to greed. But we weren't mourning. We were celebrating the family we'd found in truth, justice, and genuine care for each other. "You know what the ironic part is?" Jason said. "They spent so much energy stealing and scheming, they never built anything real. No true relationships, no honest accomplishments, no legacy, except destruction." Sarah raised her beer. "To building something real, to chosen family, to surviving the worst and becoming our best." We toasted to our future, while somewhere across town our blood family sat in separate cells, their empire of lies in ruins, finally paying the price for choosing greed over love. 6 months after the arrests, I sat in a federal courthouse conference room facing my parents for the first time since they'd banished me from Thanksgiving. They looked diminished in their orange jumpsuits, my mother's perfectly styled hair now gray at the roots, my father's commanding presence reduced to shuffling shackles. Jessica sat beside me along with federal prosecutor David Martinez and a court reporter. Across the table, my parents huddled with their public defenders. They could no longer afford the high-powered attorneys they'd initially hired. "My clients have agreed to full disclosure in exchange for consideration in sentencing," their lawyer began. "They're prepared to reveal all hidden assets and additional victims." Martinez's expression remained stone-faced. That offer expired when they tried to hide the offshore accounts. We found those without their help. What else do they have? My mother looked at me for the first time, her eyes pleading. I stared back unmoved. She'd made her choice in that 2 a.m. text message. Now she could live with the consequences. We have information about Madison's other activities, my father said quietly. Things she did that we didn't know about until recently. You mean the elderly people she scammed at the senior center? Martinez asked. Or the charity funds she stole while volunteering at the hospital? We have those victims already. My parents exchanged panicked looks. Their leverage was evaporating. There are more family members involved, my mother blurted out. My sister Helen, she helped us with the identity theft. She works at a bank, had access to systems. And there it was. To save themselves, they were turning on everyone. The family that had closed ranks against me was now fracturing completely each member, trying to minimize their own punishment by revealing others' crimes. We'll need full documentation, Martinez said, and your testimony at her trial. You want us to testify against family? My father asked, as if the irony wasn't thick enough to choke on. You had no problem destroying your own daughter, Jessica said coolly. Why should your sister be different? The negotiations continued for hours. Each revelation painted a darker picture of the criminal network my family had operated. Aunt Helen had indeed helped them open fraudulent accounts. 2 cousins had knowingly received stolen funds. Even my parents' elderly neighbor had been recruited to cash checks. But the most shocking revelation came when my mother, desperate to reduce her sentence, revealed the truth about Uncle Carl. He was going to expose us, she said flatly. We didn't mean for it to go so far. We just wanted to discredit him, make him look unstable so no one would believe his accusations. But the pressure, it broke him. The room went silent. Even the court reporter paused. Are you admitting to driving Carl to suicide? Martinez asked carefully. We isolated him systematically. My father added, perhaps realizing they'd already crossed a line. Turned his wife against him, his children, his friends, made him question his own sanity, convinced everyone he was paranoid. By the time he realized no one would ever believe him, I thought of Emma Carl's daughter finally understanding the full weight of what had been done to her father. My parents hadn't just stolen from him. They'd orchestrated a psychological torture campaign that ended in his death. We need a break, Jessica said, seeing my face. Outside the conference room, I struggled to breathe. They killed him. They actually killed him. And they just confessed to it, Jessica said grimly. This changes everything. We're no longer just talking about financial crimes. This could be manslaughter, possibly even murder charges. When we returned, Martinez had consulted with his superiors. Based on your admission regarding Carl Whitman's death, we're expanding the investigation. Your cooperation regarding financial crimes won't protect you from those charges. My parents' lawyers requested a private conference. When they returned, their clients looked broken. What do you want? My mother asked me directly, ignoring her lawyer's attempt to silence her. You've won. We're going to prison. Madison's going to prison. You've got your money back. What more do you want? I want the truth, I said. All of it. Every victim, every crime, every lie. I want you to acknowledge what you did to Uncle Carl, to me, to everyone you hurt, and I want you to do it publicly. Public admission means longer sentences, their lawyer warned. Or we can go to trial, Jessica offered. Let a jury hear everything. See how sympathetic they are to people who drove a man to suicide and then stole from his daughter. My father's hands shook as he reached for the water glass. If we do this, full confession, public statement, will you speak at sentencing? Yes, I said. I'll tell the truth about exactly who you are and what you did. They had no good options left. The deal was struck, complete confession and cooperation in exchange for my agreement not to push for the maximum sentences on the financial crimes. The potential murder charges would be handled separately. As we finalized the details, my mother made one last attempt at manipulation. "Caitlin, sweetheart, we're still your parents. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant everything," I replied. "That's why your betrayal was so complete. You didn't just steal money. You stole trust, love, and safety. You stole the family I thought I had. We gave you life," she said desperately. "And then you tried to destroy it when I wouldn't let you control it anymore." The session ended with my parents signing documents admitting to 28 separate instances of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The full amount stolen over the decades exceeded $12 million across all victims. They would be required to liquidate every asset, including items they'd hidden in storage units and safety deposit boxes across 3 states. As they were led away, my father turned back. "I hope you're satisfied." "I'm not," I said honestly. Satisfied would mean having parents who loved me more than money. But since that was never possible, justice will have to do. That evening, the prosecutor called with an update. Based on my parents' confession about Uncle Carl, they were reopening his death as a potential homicide investigation. Emma would finally get answers about her father's death. But the biggest bombshell came from Madison's reaction to her parents' confession. Learning they were cooperating fully, she unleashed her own nuclear option recorded conversations from years ago, where they discussed their crimes in detail, including their plans for me. On the recordings, my mother could be heard saying, "Caitlin's too smart. We need to be more careful with her than we were with Carl. Maybe romance is the weak spot. Get her distracted with wedding planning while we work on the trust." My father's voice responded, "Or we wait. Let her build up her career, her savings. The bigger her success, the more we can eventually take." They'd been planning to destroy me for years, viewing my success, not with pride, but as a resource to eventually plunder. Every proud parent moment had been a performance, while they plotted my financial demise. Madison had apparently been recording them for insurance planning her own eventual betrayal. The student had learned too well from the masters documenting everything for the day she'd need leverage. The recordings also revealed discussions about other family members they'd targeted, charitable organizations they'd defrauded, and elderly victims they'd scammed through my mother's volunteer work. The scope kept expanding, each revelation worse than the last. By the end of the week, 17 additional victims had been identified. The FBI established a hotline for potential victims, and calls poured in. My parents' pictures were shown on national news as an example of how family financial predators operate. Jason and I watched the coverage from my apartment, processing the magnitude of what we'd uncovered. "They weren't just criminals," he said quietly. "They were serial predators who happened to be our parents. At least now we know why we always felt like something was wrong," I replied. That feeling that love was conditional, that we were being evaluated rather than cherished. It was real. The settlement negotiations had revealed more than just hidden assets and additional crimes. They'd exposed the fundamental truth: we'd never had parents. We'd had predators who saw their children as future marks, who viewed family as a hunting ground, who measured love and potential profit. But in losing that illusion, we'd gained something real: the truth, justice for victims, and the freedom to build lives untainted by their poison. The settlement would restore our finances, but more importantly, it had restored our reality. The family we'd thought we'd lost had never existed, and the family we'd found in each other in truth and mutual support was worth more than any inheritance they could have stolen. The federal courthouse was packed on the day of sentencing. Media filled the gallery along with victims spanning 30 years of financial predation. I sat in the front row between Jason and Emma, Uncle Carl's daughter, our hands clasped in mutual support. Madison entered first, her designer clothes, replaced by a conservative suit her lawyer had clearly chosen. But she couldn't help herself. She'd found a way to style her hair dramatically, playing to the cameras, even now. Her expression cycled between defiant and pitifully innocent, depending on who was watching. As the proceedings began, Prosecutor Martinez laid out the scope of her crimes: 43 counts of fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and money laundering. The total stolen $4.7 million across 19 victims. Your Honor. Martinez began. Madison Whitman represents a particularly insidious type of criminal. She weaponized family trust, exploited emotional bonds, and showed zero remorse until caught. Even now, she attempts to manipulate this court. As if to prove his point, Madison suddenly clutched her stomach, doubling over. "I'm pregnant," she gasped. "Please, I need a doctor." Judge Catherine Thompson, a veteran of 30 years, didn't blink. "Ms. Whitman, medical records from the detention center show you had a pregnancy test 2 days ago. It was negative. Bailiff, please make note of this attempted deception of the court." Madison straightened her face, flushing as her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. She'd just added perjury to her charges in front of everyone. "Let me share some victim impact statements," Martinez continued. He read from elderly victims who'd lost their life savings from small business owners she'd defrauded from Marcus's family about the damage to their company's reputation. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood my prepared statement in hand and looked directly at Madison. "You didn't just steal money. You stole relationships, trust, and peace of mind. You orchestrated a campaign to destroy me because I had what you wanted. Not success, but the discipline to build it honestly." Madison rolled her eyes, and Judge Thompson warned her about courtroom behavior. "But your greatest crime," I continued, "was proving our parents right in their cynicism about family. You became everything they trained you to be, a predator who sees loved ones as prey. The difference is, I broke free. You never will." Madison's mask finally slipped completely. "You sanctimonious—" She caught herself, but the damage was done. The judge had seen her true face. Other victims spoke each story, adding weight to the charges. Marcus testified about the forged documents and planted evidence. His mother detailed the business relationships destroyed by Madison's schemes. Then came the moment Madison had dreaded, the playing of her own recordings. The court heard her bragging about manipulating me, planning to steal my identity, laughing about how easy it was to fool pathetic marks who think love means something. Her voice on the recordings was cold, calculating nothing like the victim she pretended to be. "Family is just a word weak people use," her recorded self said. "Smart people know it's just another angle to work." When it came time for Madison's defense, her lawyer tried valiantly. He painted her as a young woman corrupted by criminal parents, led astray by their influence. He emphasized her cooperation with authorities and her willingness to testify against them. Madison took the stand for her allocution, and it was a masterclass in manipulation. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke of her deep regret and desire to make amends. She claimed she'd been brainwashed by our parents, that she was seeking therapy, that she wanted to use her story to help other victims of family manipulation. "I know I can't undo the harm," she said, looking directly at the victims section. "But I promise to spend every day working to become someone worthy of forgiveness." It was an impressive performance. I saw some victims softening, buying into her reformed act, but Judge Thompson had reviewed the evidence thoroughly, including Madison's jailhouse communications, where she'd bragged about fooling everyone at trial. "Ms. Whitman." The judge began, "I've reviewed your case extensively. Your actions show a pattern of calculated predation spanning years. You've shown the ability to mimic remorse convincingly, as demonstrated by your performance today. But your communications from detention reveal your true nature, unrepentant and already planning future schemes." Madison's face went pale as the judge continued. "You attempted to manipulate this court with a false pregnancy claim. You've shown no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught. Your cooperation with authorities came only after learning your parents had turned on you first. Every action has been self-serving." The judge turned to the gallery. Cases like this are why family financial fraud is so devastating. The victims trusted completely and were betrayed absolutely. Ms. Whitman didn't just steal money. She stole the fundamental safety that should exist within families. Madison Whitman, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of early release for 5 years. You'll pay full restitution to all victims plus penalties. Upon release, you'll have 10 years of supervised probation with no access to financial instruments or business operations. Madison's scream of rage echoed through the courtroom. 15 years, I'm young. You're stealing my life. Caitlin, please tell them I'm your sister. But I remained silent. She was my sister in DNA only. In every way that mattered, she was a stranger who'd tried to destroy me. As they led her away, she turned venomous. You'll be alone forever, Caitlin. No one will ever love you like family should. You'll die bitter and alone. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by criminals who call themselves family, I replied calmly. The afternoon session brought my parents' sentencing. They entered looking defeated, having aged visibly in custody. The litany of their crimes took 2 hours to read. Financial fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, charity fraud, and the newly added charges related to Uncle Carl's death. Emma gave a devastating victim impact statement about losing her father to their psychological torture. You isolated him, gaslit him, drove him to despair, and then stole from his daughter. You're not just thieves, you're killers who use psychology instead of guns. Other victims spoke of lives destroyed, retirements stolen, and trust shattered. The full weight of 3 decades of predation filled the courtroom. When my parents' lawyer spoke, he didn't attempt to minimize their crimes. Instead, he focused on their ages and health issues, requesting mercy based on their likelihood to die in prison with maximum sentences. My mother's allocution was telling. Unlike Madison's performance, she offered no tears or pleas. I did what I thought was necessary to provide for my family, she said coldly. If that makes me a criminal in society's eyes, so be it. My father was slightly more conciliatory but still deflected responsibility. I regret that our actions hurt people. We never intended for things to go so far. Circumstances spiraled beyond our control. Judge Thompson's response was measured but harsh. You systematically destroyed lives for 30 years. You drove Carl Whitman to suicide through calculated psychological abuse. You stole from your own children while pretending to love them. You corrupted Madison so thoroughly that she became a mirror of your crimes. The circumstances didn't spiral. You created them deliberately. For the financial crimes, conspiracy and identity theft, charges 20 years each. For the involuntary manslaughter charge related to Carl Whitman, an additional 10 years. Sentences to run concurrently, resulting in 30 years in federal prison. Given your ages, this is effectively a life sentence. My mother finally broke sobbing hysterically. My father stared at the table defeated. They would die in prison, their legacy nothing but destruction and pain. As court concluded, victims hugged and cried together. Justice had been served, but the scars remained. The financial restitution would help, but the emotional damage would take longer to heal. Outside, the courthouse media swarmed for statements. Jason and I had prepared something together. Today, justice was served for dozens of victims, Jason said. Our biological family chose crime over love, greed over trust. But we've learned that real family isn't about blood. It's about choosing to support each other honestly and authentically. If you're trapped in a toxic family situation, I added, know that you have the right to protect yourself. Document everything. Seek help. And remember, you deserve family who build you up, not tear you down for profit. That evening, the victims gathered for dinner at a restaurant downtown. We toasted Uncle Carl's memory and celebrated not just justice, but survival. Each person at the table had been targeted for destruction, but had emerged stronger. You know what the best revenge is? Emma said, raising her glass. Living well, building the lives they tried to steal from us, being the family to each other that they never were. As I looked around the table at faces that had become dear to me through shared pain and triumph, I realized Madison's cruel prediction was wrong. I wouldn't die alone and bitter. I'd live surrounded by chosen family who'd proven their loyalty through actions, not words. The Thanksgiving table I'd been expelled from had been a gathering of criminals. This table held survivors, truth-tellers, and people who understood that love wasn't about taking, but giving. We'd all lost the families we were born into, but we'd gained something far more valuable: each other. The verdict was more than legal victory. It was validation that our pain mattered, our truth was real, and our choice to fight back was right. The family who'd tried to destroy us would spend decades in prison, while we spent those same years building lives of genuine connection and purpose. Justice had been served, but more importantly, we were free. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my new home checking the turkey and adjusting place settings for 24 guests. The house had been purchased with the recovered trust funds, not ostentatious but warm and welcoming, with enough space to host the family I'd chosen. Jason arrived first with his wife Maria and their 2 children I'd finally gotten to meet. 8-year-old Lucas immediately ran to show me his latest drawings, while 6-year-old Sophie clung to her Uncle Jason's legs, still warming up to their newly discovered aunt. "Need help?" Maria asked, tying an apron over her dress. Over the past year, she'd become the sister I'd always wanted, warm, genuine, and fiercely protective of our rebuilt family. Emma arrived next, carrying her famous apple pie and her new fiancé, David. She'd met him at a grief support group, and their shared understanding of loss had blossomed into love. Watching her smile still felt like a victory over those who'd tried to break her. Sarah burst through the door with wine and flowers, immediately taking charge of table settings. Marcus followed hesitantly. We developed an unexpected friendship through the trials, bonding over our shared experience of Madison's manipulation. He'd testified honestly rebuilt his relationship with his parents and was genuinely working to become someone worthy of trust. The doorbell continued ringing as guests arrived. Former victims who'd become friends, colleagues who'd supported me through the ordeal, neighbors who'd shown up with casseroles during the worst days. Each person here had proven their loyalty through actions, not words. "Attention, everyone," Jason called out, raising his glass as we gathered in the living room. "Before we eat, I want to share something. A year ago, many of us were strangers brought together by crime and betrayal. Today, we're family brought together by choice and love." To chosen family. Emma added her engagement ring, catching the light. To Uncle Carl, who should be here with us, and to all of us who refuse to let predators define our worth. As we toasted and moved to the dining room, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced at it, then silenced it immediately. Madison had sent another letter from prison through her lawyer, begging for forgiveness and money for her commissary account. I'd been receiving them monthly, each more manipulative than the last. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked quietly. "Just the past trying to intrude on the present," I replied, deleting the notification. "It has no power here." The dinner conversation flowed naturally, filled with updates on lives being rebuilt. Marie had started a successful catering business with her restitution money. Patricia Stern was writing a book about family financial fraud. Marcus's Family Foundation had launched a fund for fraud victims. As we ate Grandmother Eleanor's recipes, copied from her handwritten cards I'd found in the recovered belongings, stories emerged that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Laughter that wasn't forced, plans that weren't survival strategies, dreams that extended beyond just making it through another day. "I have an announcement," Emma said during dessert. "David and I are getting married next June, and Caitlin, Jason, I want you both in the wedding party. You're the family my father would have wanted me to have." Tears flowed freely as we embraced. Uncle Carl's daughter was not just surviving, but thriving, building the life her father had been denied. "Speaking of announcements," I said, standing with my own glass, "Morrison Industries has offered me a position as Chief Financial Officer. It seems they were impressed by someone who could maintain excellence while fighting a federal fraud case." The room erupted in congratulations. Charles Morrison had called personally, saying he wanted leadership that had been tested by fire and emerged with integrity intact. The position came with responsibilities for protecting the company from the kind of fraud Madison had attempted. "There's more," I continued. I'm establishing the Carl Whitman Foundation for Family Fraud Victims. It'll provide legal resources, counseling, and emergency financial assistance for people trapped in toxic family financial situations. Jason stood to hug me. Carl would be so proud. We're turning our worst experience into hope for others. As the evening progressed, children played in the living room while adults shared stories and strategies for healing. The house filled with the sounds of genuine joy, not the performed happiness of my childhood holidays, but real connection. Marcus pulled me aside on the patio. I need to thank you again. When you agreed to let me be part of this group after everything I did, you were a victim too, I said. Maybe a complicit one at first, but Madison would have destroyed you eventually. The fact that you owned your mistakes and worked to make amends, that takes character. I've been seeing someone, he admitted. Someone who actually likes my spreadsheets and financial planning. Turns out those weren't flaws. I just had the wrong audience. I smiled genuinely. I'm glad. Everyone deserves someone who appreciates their authentic self. As guests began leaving, each departure came with long hugs and promises to meet before next Thanksgiving. This wasn't obligatory family time to be endured, but cherished time with people we actually wanted to see. Sarah stayed to help clean up, as did Jason and his family. As we worked together in comfortable rhythm, I thought about the Thanksgiving I'd been excluded from the year before. That rejection had felt like the end of the world, but it had actually been the beginning of something better. Do you ever wonder how they're doing? Sarah asked carefully. Sometimes, I admitted. The prison newsletter mentioned Madison started a financial literacy class for inmates. I can't tell if it's genuine reform or her next long con. My parents refuse to speak to each other, apparently. They're in separate facilities, blaming each other for everything. Any regrets? Jason asked. I considered the question seriously. I regret that they chose crime over love. I regret the years I spent trying to earn something they were incapable of giving, but fighting back. Building this. I gestured to my home filled with evidence of real love. No regrets at all. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat in my living room looking at photos from the evening. Real smiles, genuine laughter, authentic connection. The family photos from my childhood had always felt staged, everyone performing their roles. These photos captured something true. My phone showed one final message from the day, the prison system notification that Madison's commissary request had been denied due to my block on communications. She could write all the letters she wanted. I was under no obligation to receive them. On the mantel sat a photo of Uncle Carl that Emma had given me. He looked young, hopeful before the family had targeted him. Next to it was a photo from tonight, all of us raising glasses to his memory. He'd lost his battle, but we'd won the war he'd started. The house still smelled of turkey and pie, echoes of laughter lingering in the rooms. This was what family felt like when it was real, not perfect. Several guests were still in therapy, still struggling with trust, still rebuilding, but honest, present, chosen. I thought about my parents' Thanksgiving in prison, eating institutional food, in silence surrounded by the consequences of their choices. Madison's Thanksgiving performing reform for an audience of felons who probably saw right through her. They'd traded authentic family for money and control, and ended up with neither. Meanwhile, I'd been forced to give up a toxic family and had gained a true one. The money recovered from the trust and restitution was nice, but it paled compared to the wealth of genuine relationships I'd built. As I turned out the lights and headed to bed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete contentment. Not the anxious peace of avoiding conflict with dangerous people, but real satisfaction with the life I'd built. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The foundation launched the new position, continuing to heal and help others heal. But tonight I was exactly where I belonged, in a home built on truth, surrounded by the evidence of love that didn't cost anything but gave everything. The family that had exiled me from their Thanksgiving had given me the greatest gift possible, the freedom to find people actually worth being thankful for. And for that, ironically, I was grateful. 2 years after that redemptive Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed at 2 a.m. with a text notification. The parallel to how this journey began wasn't lost on me as I reached for the device, though this time I felt no dread, only mild curiosity about who would be messaging at this hour. The number was familiar but blocked. Madison somehow messaging from prison through a contraband phone. Her text was lengthy, raw, and for the first time seemed genuine. Caitlin, I know you've blocked me everywhere, but I had to try one more time. Not for money, not for sympathy. Just to tell you the truth, I'm dying. Liver failure from years of prescription drug abuse I hid from everyone. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months. Prison medical care isn't exactly stellar, but that's not your problem. I've been going to real therapy here. Not the performance I did for the judge, but actual work with a psychiatrist who specializes in personality disorders. Turns out our parents created 2 monsters. I just embraced it while you fought it. You're the only one who got out whole. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I destroyed any right to that. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I took from you. Not just money or Marcus or family gatherings, but your ability to trust, to feel safe, to believe in unconditional love. I stole things that can't be replaced, and I'm sorry. Actually sorry, not strategically sorry. The other inmates here call me Trust Fund, ironically. They all know my story. Some have similar ones. We're a whole unit of people who destroyed families for money. The things I hear in group therapy would make you sick, but it also makes me realize you saved yourself. You could have become like us, but you chose differently. Mom and Dad write me letters full of poison, still blaming everyone but themselves. They'll die believing they were victims. But I know the truth now. We were a family of predators who got caught. You were the only prey who turned into a hunter. I'm leaving you something in my will. Not money, I don't have any, but grandmother's journals. The real ones, not the edited versions our parents showed us. She wrote about her fears that her son was wrong somehow. She knew what they were and tried to protect us in her own way. That trust fund wasn't just money. It was her attempt to give us an escape route. You're the only one who used it right. I won't contact you again. This phone gets destroyed after I hit send. But I needed you to know that somewhere in this broken criminal mind, there's a piece that remembers being 5 years old and looking up to my big sister, before they taught me to see you as competition, before I chose to be what they made me instead of fighting like you did. You won, not because you have the money or the friends or the life I tried to steal. You won because you stayed human. I hope your Thanksgivings are everything ours never were. Goodbye, Caitlin. For what it's worth, you deserved better than us. I sat in my bedroom reading and rereading the message until it suddenly disappeared. The self-deleting app she'd used erasing the evidence. My hands weren't shaking like they had 2 years ago. Instead, I felt an unexpected wave of, not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. I padded to the kitchen and made tea, then called Jason despite the early hour. He answered on the second ring alert immediately. What's wrong? Madison's dying, she texted. She says she's actually sorry. Silence stretched between us before he spoke. Do you believe her? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. She is who she is because of who they raised her to be. The apology doesn't undo anything, but I'm glad she sees it clearly before the end. Are you going to visit her? No, that chapter is closed. But I'll make sure she gets decent medical care. Not for her, for the 5-year-old sister she mentioned, the one who existed before our parents corrupted her. 3 days later, Jessica confirmed through her contacts that Madison was indeed in the prison hospital with end-stage liver disease. She'd hidden addiction issues for years, self-medicating with pills she'd stolen or bought with stolen money. The damage was irreversible. I arranged for a better doctor and hospice care when the time came, but maintained my boundary of no direct contact. Madison sent one more message through her lawyer, just thank you. and then nothing more. She died 4 months later, 2 months before her prediction. The prison chaplain called to tell me she'd been attending services, not performing, but genuinely seeking peace. Her last words were reportedly, "Tell my sister she was right to run." The funeral was sparse. Our parents were denied permission to attend, and most family wanted nothing to do with her. Jason and I stood at the graveside with Emma and the chaplain. We didn't speak of forgiveness or redemption. We spoke of waste. The waste of potential of family of choices that led to a prison hospital bed at 31. My parents sent a letter through their lawyer blaming me for Madison's death, claiming my cruelty and abandonment had driven her to despair. I filed it with all the others' evidence of their inability to change, even when facing their own mortality in prison. 6 months after Madison's death, I received a package from her lawyer. Inside were grandmother Eleanor's journals, as promised. Reading them was like discovering a family I'd never known existed. My grandmother had been wise, kind, and increasingly worried about her son's manipulative tendencies and concerning lack of empathy. One entry stood out, "I fear for my granddaughters. Caitlin shows such promise, such genuine kindness, but I see how my son looks at her, like an investment rather than a child. Madison is too young to tell, but she watches everything with calculating eyes that remind me of him. I'm setting up the trust to give them options. I pray Caitlin finds the strength to use hers wisely. She'd known. She'd tried to protect us. The trust wasn't just an inheritance. It was an escape fund from the family she knew was toxic." The Carl Whitman Foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We'd helped over 300 families escape financial predators, provided legal services to prosecute family fraud, and created support groups nationwide. Emma served as deputy director, turning her pain into purpose. At our 3rd annual fundraising gala, Charles Morrison announced that Morrison Industries was doubling their donation. Caitlin Thompson has shown us that integrity isn't just about avoiding crime. It's about actively fighting it, even when the criminals share your DNA. Marcus attended with his wife, Jennifer, both now volunteers for the foundation. He'd become a powerful advocate for manipulation survivors, his story of being conned by someone he loved resonating with many victims. As I gave my keynote speech that night, I looked out at a ballroom full of survivors, supporters, and success stories. 3 years ago, I received a text message telling me I wasn't welcome at my family's Thanksgiving. It felt like the end of my world. I'd just given them everything I had, and they dismissed me like an inconvenient stranger. The room was silent, hundreds of faces understanding that particular pain. But that rejection was actually my liberation. It forced me to see the truth, that love shouldn't come with a price tag, that family shouldn't feel like a business transaction, that giving everything to people who only take isn't noble. It's enabling. I talked about Uncle Carl, about Madison's wasted potential, about parents who chose crime over children. But more importantly, I talked about the family we'd all built together. The supporters who showed up, the survivors who shared their stories, the professionals who believed us when our own blood called us liars. If you're sitting at a Thanksgiving table where your worth is measured in dollars, where love comes with conditions, where family feels like a threat rather than a refuge, you have the right to leave. You have the right to build something better. You have the right to choose family that chooses you back. The standing ovation wasn't for me. It was for all of us who'd chosen ourselves over toxic loyalty. Later that night at the after party in my home, I found myself in the same kitchen where I'd hosted that redemptive Thanksgiving. Sarah raised a glass of champagne. "Remember when you thought losing them meant losing everything?" "I lost nothing real," I replied, "just illusions that were costing me everything." Jason joined us, his arm around Maria. "Madison was wrong in her final text. You didn't stay human despite our family. You stayed human because you left them behind." As the evening wound down, I stepped onto the patio for a moment of quiet. The stars were brilliant, and I thought about Madison gone at 31, my parents spending their remaining years in prison, Uncle Carl, whose truth had finally been heard, Grandmother Eleanor, whose journals revealed she'd tried to save us all. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another family reaching out to the foundation for help escaping financial predators. Another story of betrayal and hope. Another chance to turn our pain into someone else's pathway to freedom. I went back inside to my chosen family, to laughter and love that didn't cost anything, but gave everything. The journey that began with a cruel text message at 2 a.m. had led to this moment, surrounded by authentic connection, doing meaningful work, living a life built on truth rather than manipulation. To those watching who wonder if they should stay with toxic family out of obligation, who question whether blood truly is thicker than water, who fear that leaving means being alone forever, I want you to know something. You deserve family who celebrates your boundaries rather than violating them. You deserve love that doesn't require payment. You deserve Thanksgivings where you're genuinely welcome, not just tolerated until you're no longer useful. The family I lost wasn't worth keeping. The family I found was worth everything. If you're facing similar struggles with family who take but never give, who manipulate rather than support, who see you as a resource rather than a person, what's keeping you trapped? Share your story in the comments below. You're not alone, and your experiences might be the key to someone else's freedom. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to hear more stories of survival justice and the power of choosing yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away from toxic family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to stop enabling their destruction. Thank you for listening to my journey from rejection to redemption. May your holidays be filled with genuine love, your tables surrounded by people who value you for who you are rather than what you can provide, and may you always remember, the best family is the one you choose. Remember, blood makes you related, but loyalty, respect, and genuine love make you family. Choose wisely. Choose yourself. Choose freedom.